Yes.
No mai, haere mai everyone. Welcome to the first public transport meeting of the 2025 triennium. My name's Ros Connolly. I'm the councillor for Upper Hutt and I'm the host of your public transport committee this morning. I would like to open the meeting with a karakia. I believe the words will be up on the screen if you would like to join me. She says optimistically, waiting for the words to be up on the screen.
Sorry, Julie, I've set that up as well.
Okay, not on the screen. If you do know the words, follow along. Manawa mai te mori nuku, manawa mai te mori rangi. He manawa nui, he manawa tahi, he manawa ora e, ka whakamaua kia tina, hui e tae ki e. Right, getting into the bureaucratic matters on our agenda. I believe everybody is here this morning, so there won't be any apologies. And everyone is here in person, so no online attendance. In terms of conflicts of interest, does anyone have any conflicts of interest that they would like to note? There being none, we will move on to public participation. Very excitingly, I believe on the agenda we have 4 people who would like to speak to us this morning, 2 online and 2 are at our committee in person. The first person I have on my agenda is Anna McMartin, who is going to be talking about bus replacements. Anna, are you there and ready to go? You have 5 minutes to talk, and then the committee has 5 minutes to ask you questions, and there'll be a bell at 4 minutes and then another bell again at 5.
Lovely. Kia ora koutou, folks. I'm Anna McMartin. Really pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you, so thank you. I am speaking as a private individual, and I just want to reflect a little bit on my experience with bus replacements. I'm a loyal and keen public transport user and have been for, I think, about 18 years. I live in Upper Hutt, so take the train regularly. My experience has been that while the service has improved over the years, bus replacements especially haven't been to the standard that I would hope, and I feel are sort of bringing the overall quality of the service down, and I don't think they're tenable in their current form. So I just want to talk a little bit about my experience in the first working week of this year, which was a bit challenging. It was a bit of a touch and go call for me. I wasn't sure whether I would use public transport in the first week of the year because it has been a bit traditionally challenging. I got caught up in the troubles of that first week of provision. I just want to talk about a few little experiences I had because I think these may be indicative of some of the broader issues. In that first week, I managed to get in on my first working day of Tuesday well enough, but the return trip was really quite challenging. I arrived at Wellington station in good time to get the bus, but found myself in a queue. There was only one bus provided at peak time, so by the time the queue wound its way, which took quite a lot of winding because there were several services queuing up for buses, I actually missed out. So too did a young man who was clearly in Wellington for the weekend and had all his luggage and was looking for a positive experience and was a bit frustrated by the whole thing. So this was compounded by the fact that there didn't appear to be communications amongst the staff. So the staff weren't able to advise when the buses were coming, how many would be, and there was, I think, struggling a bit with the crowd control, getting people into the right queue for the right bus. I did eventually make it on to the bus, but there were more challenges at this point. A young woman, I think a teenager, tried to get on the bus. She'd obviously made an error. She'd used her snapper at one of the swipey machines, but that wasn't the right thing to do. She should have done it on the bus. So the bus driver told her, couldn't help. She'd have to get a refund elsewhere, and she ended up sort of standing on the platform as the bus departed. And I suspect what had happened to her there was that she didn't have the funds and she wasn't able to sort it out on the spot and needed a bit of support to get through that situation. But in the confusion, that unfortunately didn't happen. I think one area that I did note was in part, I think because the staff didn't have the information to direct people well, there was a bit of frustration experienced by a staffer speaking with the bus driver to the effect of, why don't people understand how trains work? The bus is just like the train, I think, was the point they were trying to make there. A couple of issues there. The bus wasn't functioning in the same way as the train. It was not going on all the stops in one direction, but was going on all in return, or vice versa. But this was difficult for people to understand. And I felt that the staff and driver could have perhaps been a little bit more helpful in understanding and directing people rather than expressing frustration with them. I just want to make a final point about the queuing issue, particularly. So buses are obviously less accessible to people with some disabilities or chronic health conditions than are trains, but one particular barrier is the need to queue. So when I missed out on the first bus, I needed to queue half an hour or a bit more for a second bus. Not everyone actually can stand for half an hour. I have a chronic illness and at times haven't been able to stand for half an hour after a day of work. So I think that arrangement does need to be thought about from an accessibility point of view. So yeah, look, I think just to conclude that my preference would be that bus replacements are an absolute last resort because they are significantly less accessible and convenient for customers. They just don't rise to the same standard. But where we do need bus replacements, I think there's room for greater capacity provided. I think the queuing has to be managed because it's not suitable for some people. I think there needs to be considerably better communications to customers, and I think the staff need to be better communicated with and informed so that they can direct traffic a bit better and just, I guess, show a bit of compassion for people who find the bus replacement system difficult to understand.
Thank
I
you
think
so
that's me.
much. I'll open it up to questions now. I've already got a question from Councillor Ponta.
Kia ora, Anna. Look,
Kia ora.
that's a really reasoned and tempered response to the issues that you're confronting, because I know that bus replacements can be damn frustrating at times. My question is around in a slightly different area, and I wonder whether you are able to answer this. If you track the amount that you pay on your Snapper card, do you track the amount that you pay? And if you do you see any variations between what you pay on bus replacements and what you pay ordinarily going by train?
Oh, look, I'm sorry. I don't think that I do actually track that closely enough. Although I could dig it out after and submit it to the committee if it is helpful. I do know that I have been caught out in that situation where it's not clear where you're swiping on the Snapper machine or on the bus. If you get that wrong, you then have to go back and apply for a refund, which for me is not the end of the world, but for people on a low income or who have trouble with processes, that can be quite challenging. So I'm sorry, that doesn't quite answer your question, but I might be able to afterwards.
Yeah, if you're able to, that might be. Thanks, Anna.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions from the committee? One question from me then. You said that you considered whether or not to take the bus at the beginning of the year, given that you knew the train wouldn't be running. Has this experience affected your ongoing usage of the trains, particularly when buses will be replacing those trains, perhaps you'll be reconsidering your journey planning at the beginning of 2027.
Yes, unfortunately, it has. Bus replacements feel like a bit of a roll of the dice, and I did think about whether I would try to take bus replacements in the first working week, and I decided I would give it a shot. But I've just found the reliability is such that I wouldn't. I wouldn't do it again. If it's a bus replacement week, I would make alternative arrangements. And I think the challenge in the working for home era is that lots of people have employers who would rather they got online promptly and did a good day's work rather than, you know, spend time waiting for the bus or experience that unreliability. So I would be reluctant to take train replacements again, I think.
Awesome.
Bus
My
replacements.
question's prompted another question from Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Morena koutou. Kia ora, Anna. Thank you for sharing your experience today. I'm interested in some of your experience might be specifically related to that week in January where I got a lot of constituent feedback that there was a difficult week around bus replacements. Interested in any experience, how much of that experience has been common at other times? We had a lot of inter-peak replacement in November or last year through to November, December on the Hutt Valley line. We have regular weekend bus replacements for rail works, and then every now and again an unplanned bus. So what's been your experience more over time? Yes.
Look, it's been a real mixed bag. I think one of the things I found problematic with bus replacements, and this might have been addressed, but the timetable changes, but the new timetable or the temporary timetable for the bus replacement isn't easy to find. It's not where you would generally find the timetable. So in the past, I have missed the bus on the way home, which has been problematic, particularly when I've had health issues. Having to wait an extra half hour at night, for example, has been quite challenging. So that is one thing I've noticed that's been a bit of an obstacle. Outside of that, I've found it quite hit and miss. Sometimes it's been fine, but other times I haven't got on the bus because there hasn't been sufficient capacity, or it's taken a long time to get either direction, which has meant I haven't necessarily got to things on time. So while it's been a mixed bag, I think it's unreliable enough that I don't feel confident trusting it if there's somewhere I absolutely have to be at a particular time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So those are all the questions we have time for, but you'll be aware that buses replacing trains are on the agenda today. So if you would like to join or stay online for the rest of our meeting, you'll be welcome to do so. And we'll also follow up after we've had our meeting with any updates that come out of that.
Lovely. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. So our next public participant is Hayley Vucic, and she is here in person. In fact, Hayley has an assistant.
I do.
By the looks.
The best kind of assistant.
You'll probably sit on my knee.
Do you want to read your book? Right. Well, in the interests of time, I'll try and kick off while we organise ourselves. Morena tātou, ko Hayley Vucic tōku ingoa. This is my son Lou. Lovely to be in front of everybody today. I am actually a Greater Wellington staff member. I work in the policy team in Roputaia, but I'm coming today to talk about public transport experiences in Belmont in the Hutt, where I live. I'll just open this up, Lou. Do you want to read your book? Yeah. Do you want to sit in the chair? It's actually more intimidating than I imagined, being on this side of the table. I've worked for the council for 16 years and I've never sat in a public role before, so it's different. Yeah. So I don't need to introduce to anybody the fact that the closure of Melbourne train station has meant quite a lot of difference for public transport users in the Hutt. And specifically for where I live in Belmont, that means that the 145 bus has been rerouted, so it no longer travels to Melling Station, it now travels across the valley to Waterloo Station. And so that's a public transport option for people like myself who regularly commute into Wellington for work, and it's also the route for school children going to high school in Lower Hutt. It's really great to have that option on the cards while we have the construction works around Te Waitakamori. And I recognise, and I think people in my neighbourhood realise that we have to forbear some of the difficulties in transport in the Hutt over the next few years. But at the moment, over this last month, the experience of public transport has been that it's been really unreliable, really slow, and frankly, pretty frustrating. So just to share a few experiences from myself and other people in my immediate neighbourhood, including a neighbour who I met at a bus stop when the bus was cancelled. Generally speaking, the bus reliability for the 145 is really poor. This is most particularly the case in the morning. It wouldn't be unusual for the bus to be running 15 or 18 minutes late. I know of school children who've been unable to get to sporting events on time because the bus is run 20 minutes late, for instance. I've also heard of people shifting to go as early as possible, which, it's wonderful that there's also that option, but a 6:15 bus is a fairly crack of dawn kind of bus to have to get onto. Other significant issue for myself in particular is the connection between trains and buses. So the ability to do that multimodal transport seems to be a bit poorly set up. It would be wonderful if we could bring some attention to it. 3 out of the last 4 times that I've tried to take a train to Waterloo and then the subsequent bus home, the bus has either left early, the train has been late, or a combination of the two. And then to sort of double down on that, because the bus service is relatively infrequent, I think it's every 25 minutes or half an hour, if something goes wrong, you are at the bus stop for maybe an hour. And then with the traffic that we have in Lower Hutt at the moment, and having a young family at home, it's not really an option for me to call my husband to come and rescue me from the bus station. For high school kids, I think things are really quite inconvenient at the moment. Unfortunately, the transport route to get to Waterloo has meant that the kids are no longer going so close to a number of the schools or are required to take 2 buses in order to get to school. Again, I've seen a lot of kids starting to go on earlier buses, so I'm imagining they're getting there on time rather than being late. I have a neighbour whose daughter regularly scoots or used to scoot to school, but that's not an option for her either. Unfortunately, the works associated with the Riverlink project have replaced the cycleway, understandably, but the replacement cycleway is in gravel and not that suitable for kids to be travelling on by bike or by scooter. And finally, I think people are getting turned off public transport. I've had conversations this week with people on my street who are looking at other options. For my family, we're looking at purchasing a second car, which I'd really rather not do. I'd really rather there be a reliable transport system. So I had a couple of questions for the council, but really my kind of key point is, what can the council do to work with the affected community of Belmont to improve the reliability of our service? We know that we're going to go into maybe 5+ years of really significant transport disruption. It's only going to get worse. I would love to stay a regular public transport user, but the inconvenience is really driving me away. So thanks for the chance to talk today.
Excellent. Questions? Well, I'll kick it off then. I guess, do you have any answers to those questions that you've posed? I'm interested to hear that you would be looking to get a private vehicle, because most of the problems with the reliability are due to, many of the problems with the reliability are due to the works that are occurring as part of Riverlink, and they will affect you as a private car user as well as a public transport user. So I'm wondering whether that will actually improve your situation. and so focusing in on how can we make the public transport better, and any thoughts you have around that we'd really appreciate.
Previously, when the train and the bus connection was at Melling Station, there was a requirement for buses to timestamp and wait to a certain time, I understand, at the station before that they left. So that situation of the train being a little late and the bus not leaving early couldn't happen so well. So I think something like that, where there's better timed arrivals, there's a little buffer in the system that the bus isn't there too early, and then a requirement to timestamp or something at that critical kind of location. I don't know how practical that is, but that was something that seemed to work in Melling. Is private transport an option? Certainly State Highway 2 is extremely snarled up in the mornings. Where I live on the hill, you can actually escape round the back and drop down through Maunguraki and get closer to Petone. So that is a potential option. But you're absolutely right that it's still going to present a difficulty. And I would really prefer to be a public transport user if possible. Yeah.
Thank you for that comment, particularly around the connections between the bus and the train. I think I'll ask staff to provide an update on that, and we'll get back to you with where we're at. I've got a few other questions now. Councillor Saw, Councillor Ponta, and Councillor Elder, in that order.
Thank you so much for coming in, and I completely relate to being in that seat. Before I was elected, I came and did public participation. I've never been so nervous in my life. So at least we have someone who's, already done it, cut his teeth on it really early. I just had a look at the Route 145, and I have taken it from Waterloo Station, and I was wondering how helpful would it be to have bus priority lanes from somewhere between Waterloo or somewhere in Lower Hutt to Belmont? Would that help, do you think? Would that be a mitigation that would assist?
I'm a little uncertain. The problem in the morning is not so much the getting across Lower Hutt Valley once you're there. It's actually getting from State Highway 2 onto the Kennedy Good Bridge. You can wait 15 minutes to turn across that intersection. And I don't know if that's just the very heavy traffic or there's something fundamental there.
Also, do you think it might be the phasing of the lights?
Potentially.
So say something, I think there is technology where buses can have, I guess that there's an intersection, I guess there's an intersection between State Highway and local roads there, but
yeah.
I guess technology such as permitting buses to, what's the traffic light thing?
Bus bridge.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Things like that. Would that help in that situation?
That seems like potentially an option. Irrespective of whether you're in a bus or a car, that's very snarled up, that particular turn-off. There's flashing lights to let you know that it'll be queued traffic, so it is often a difficult sort of junction.
Councillor Ponta?
Yeah, so I think my question is perhaps more to Sam, if you allow it. Samantha, I just hearing the issue about reliability, so buses that are arriving 20 minutes late or more seems to me to be a problem of the buses making the transaction to start with through the Kennedy Good Bridge State Highway 2 area and then getting up to the top of the Route 145, so they're actually starting late on their return journey. What, in instances like this elsewhere, how do you overcome that? Is that an issue of putting more buses in and actually just recognising that on this trip for this period of time, every bus journey is generally going to take longer, but we can improve the reliability by having more buses and them actually starting on time?
Do you want to answer that, Sam? You don't have to. Standing orders say you don't have to, and that's just so officers aren't put on the spot. But we would definitely come back to you with a response to that question as part of, because I'm going to write you a reply when I've got Sam to do a bit of digging into the bus train connection. Do you want to add that to your letter, or would you like to make some comments now?
Happy to make a general comment through Chair, just in terms of the whole situation in Lower Hutt at the moment with Riverlink is such that we are continually reviewing what the services are doing, and we're going to be in that mode for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
The 145 is something that we are specifically looking at the moment, and I think just in terms of adding additional bus capacity at the moment is, with the traffic congestion, is probably not the answer, but can assure you that it is something that is constantly under review. There is a disruption group. They're looking at traffic congestion generally in the Hutt. That covers us, Hutt City and NZTA.
That's great to
so
know.
We've all got our eyes on that in the context of the next 5 years.
So.
I've just been informed by Nigel that technically question time has expired, so I'm going to move that we extend public participation and question time, so that we can continue. Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I've got two more questions. Councillor Elder and Councillor Staples.
I live locally, so I share your frustration about what's going on around, particularly around the bridge. Is there a transport option for you to get to Western Hut rather than go all the way across to Waterloo? And if not, would that help?
We have looked at it as an option. Probably cycling is the only real option there, because the ability to get from State Highway 2 to Western Hut is relatively difficult. We have to go down to the Dells or around. We have to go through Kennedy Good all the way down and through. So it's not straightforward. I live on Hill Road. It's a large hill. It's not, I have in the past been a cyclist. I'm not at this point in my life. An electric bike is potentially an option. It's not super straightforward. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Staples.
Thank you. My question was around the schools, because I was just looking at Route 145 and if this is out of date, because it looked like it used to stop at all the schools, St Warren's and Queensgate, Valley High. So are you telling us now, please, that it's no longer doing that the stops are further away and the kids have to walk, or...
So I don't have teenage children yet, so I'm not familiar
Working
with
on
the
it.
details yet. I hope that Riverlink is complete by the time that this guy gets to high school. My understanding is that it doesn't go as close to a number of the schools. So I have a friend who has a daughter at St Warren's, for instance, and the closest stop to them there is a Queensgate, I believe. So that's about a 15-minute walk away. It used to be closer. I don't believe the bus goes past St Bernard's anymore. I don't know the schools well enough, but I've heard from multiple parents that it's less convenient for sure.
Does anyone else have any questions for Hayley? No. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and bringing your assistant along. He potentially is rather over question time now. So
I think so. It's time for a donut.
Yum. Awesome. So thank you so much for coming and talking to us, and we will follow up on the questions you've asked. So the next public participation that I have on my agenda is from Wendy. Is Wendy here? Awesome. Can you come up and same rules, 5 minutes to speak and then 5 minutes for questions.
Kia ora koutou. I'm here about the safe. This is where's the first one? Oh, there's. Okay. Good. So, I'm here to talk about public safety. And I work in security and I'm a filmmaker and I'm kind of deep into this stuff. So, I just want to provide an anecdote because that's what we are here as community members. Is that I had an incident on 27th January on the bus, and there was no way for the bus to actually call the help. And I didn't have a phone. I haven't carried a phone for years. I mean, who is the crazy person who doesn't carry a phone these days? And I only carry a tablet which only has the internet. But somehow the bus driver was not able to call the dispatcher and say that, hey, can you call the police? We have an ongoing incident here. And it took 5 minutes for the bus driver to actually hand over his personal cell phone for me to call the police and talk to the dispatcher. There was no way of the bus driver to actually communicate that there was an ongoing incident. Why do we have all the cameras there that we can't do anything with them? And we have all this expensive infrastructure, but it's kind of not, I guess, doing its job, or it's not being used effectively. And I just came with an analyst, I came up with a laundry list of issues. And when I looked at the order papers, there was only 2 pages about security and safety. There was 1 page about summarized stuff like anecdotal incidents, but no details and no follow-ups and no stakeholders or no accountability. Who is responsible for actually solving these issues? There was no transparency. And there was 1 page about just the statistics, year-on-year rolling issues, but nothing about causally, nothing about incident register, nothing about risk register. And I don't think there's a communication too much about between the operators, Metlink, and the committee. And I think committee would benefit from real-time analysis around what's going on. Sometimes risk can become costly incidents, just like bus driver shortages. You can be reactive, or there could be hey, we could have a risk about this stuff that's going to happen in the future. not like what happened in the order papers, the incident response from December. So there was like 2-3 month delay. And like what happened amidst the Ashburton or Auckland bus stoppings, that was all kind of reactive stuff. So what can we do with it? Well, we can have some kind of real-time statistics like the Feldman Geonet. Who hasn't used this web portal around earthquakes? Like where you can actually see on real time what people feel about earthquakes. Of course, in this case, we wouldn't have this but we would at least have some silent interface for passengers to actually just say just click one thing like unsafe, safe, or uncomfortable, just their feelings. And then if they scan a QR code on the bus, you can actually collect all the information in one go and not break privacy, because all you are collecting is statistics about Roland bus, and that can be reconciled with real-time tracking information, what's already there. And feelings matter because that generates other things around it. And you could even have mystery passenger program. You can organize the company to actually have trusted representatives that can actually come up with the statistics in real time about what's actually going on in the field, and not just rely on the reports what comes from the actual commercial operators. And I think there's been like a failure of imaging in many cases, and it's a global problem. We have in like risk identification, we do know how to have immunization, and we have to like figure out, hey, what's going on. So that's why it would be nice that there's like real time. And what I would like to see council have a mandate for is to have some kind of, the QR code thing is very, very easy. It's a very, very simple solution. Well, it's not solution, but it at least gives some kind of data that doesn't breach people's privacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for your presentation. And I'd just like to express the fact that I apologise that you had a really unfortunate incident, and I appreciate you coming here to tell us about what happened and allowing us to learn from what must have been a really scary and horrible day for you. I wondered if, Sam, you wanted to comment on general safety and the ability of drivers to contact Operations Centre. If not, again, we can do the same thing with a follow-up. We'll follow up with that information for you, because I think that sounds quite alarming to me, and I'm sure people around the table are also concerned about that, if that's okay. But we've got a range of questions here. We've got Councillor Ponta, Saw, and Councillor Johnson, and Councillor Wolf.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think my question again is probably not to Wendy, but maybe to you, and it's a question about whether we can get a paper to this committee on where we are at as a council in terms of integrating our bus communications. My understanding at the moment is that drivers can communicate with their own operational centre, so kinetic to kinetic, but we don't have an integrated system, and we don't have the system integrated into the Blue Mountains facility in Upper Hutt, which I think we are looking to do for our trains. So I think Wendy's touched on a bigger question about full integration across our network, which I'm very keen on, but I'd like to get an update on.
Is everyone else? I think that it sounds like a really good idea, and I mean we have had papers before on specifically dedicated to safety on our services. Maybe that's worth revisiting in this this term. So can we put that on the action list to bring back another paper looking at integrated systems around communications, and specifically in relation to safety and getting information. Next, Councillor Saw.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wendy, for coming in, and thank you for sharing your experience. But also the next step is to come with some constructive and creative solutions, so these sorts of things won't happen again, or and having the patience to understand how our system works. wondering whether if this was something that if you still wanted to continue to advocate on, would you be interested in looking at our, we've got current openings for our public transport advisory group, and whether that would be something you would consider to be a member of to bring those sorts of issues to the group, or if you knew of other people in your community who may want to advocate as public transport users.
It would be good if there is a public, like a working group that addresses some of these problems and has stakeholders like New Zealand Police, and they could actually provide constructive feedback and actually collaborate.
I think with incidents we have before, but if you want, I'd encourage you to have a look at the our notice for inviting applications for our public transport advisory group if this is an issue that you want to participate in.
So Councillor Johnson, Councillor Wolfe and Councillor Ponta might have a follow-up.
So before I say, turn it on. God, that's unusual for me. Before I say anything, can I declare a conflict of interest, which I should have declared earlier, but didn't realise this was coming up. My conflict of interest is I'm with New Zealand Police. We're currently investigating public transport safety. Am I able to speak still?
It's your call.
I just want to ask.
That conflict will be noted.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just ask a question. So I just said I am with New Zealand Police, and we are concerned about public safety nationwide and increasing incidents of public safety. One of the things that I'm currently looking at is reports. So I just wanted to ask a basic question, which you don't have to answer, but after the incident, did you report it to police?
The police was called on the scene, and they came after 5 minutes, and they asked my contact details, and they asked very personal, sensitive details, and they never came back to me in email. Okay.
It doesn't surprise me that they didn't come back, but I'm really pleased that somebody turned up and that you did report, because I think there's a difference.
I think there's a communication blockage.
Yeah,
like a savage blockage.
Yeah, it's actually really hard to get the statistics, both what these guys get and then what police get, and that's why we're starting to get quite worried, because the danger level is not great.
But having a real-time heat map from passengers, provided the passengers where there's an incident that suddenly there's 10 hot incidents, they can actually look at the hotspots in the camera straight away, and they can actually proactively manage the situation before it escalates.
I think it's actually a really brilliant idea, and it could go straight through to a card system as well. So.
Thank you for that. Next question is from Councillor Wolfe and then Councillor Ponta, and then I'll draw questions to a close with this with Wendy, because we've got time.
Wendy, thank you for coming in. This area is close to my heart, and I know that it's close to Councillor Ponta's as well, along with all of us. My question is that in aviation, in general aviation, there's an anonymous reporting process where pamphlets are put in the seat pockets of general aviation aircraft, so that people, if they've got concerns, can report back. Is that something that you think that we should consider in the future?
Yes, but in real time, in a way that is low effort. That just to scan a QR code, because everybody can actually scan QR code this since COVID. So people are actually very accustomed to scan the QR code, which links to the trip information.
Absolutely.
And then just having one click, that how do I feel? And if you have 10 or 20 of them in like a period of 2 minutes, there's an easy way to actually zoom in and then, hey, there's an incident going, instead of relying AI situational awareness and stuff like that.
Thank you very much for your feedback. It's been very useful.
And it's not like 3 months delayed after reporting that comes from the aggregated statistics from past paper forms.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Councillor Ponta for the final question.
No, my question's been asked. So.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That's the end of the questions we have for you. But once again, thank you so much for coming and sharing your insight with us. So the final person on public participation is Hayley Jeffrey, who has been waiting very patiently online, listening to the other public participants. It's your shot now, Hayley. So 5 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for questions. Thank you.
Kia ora, ko tuatahi kei mihi ki ngā tangata whenua o tēnei rohi. Ko reo peiho te maunga e rune taku nāku. Ko whakapapati awa te e mahia nei aku maharahara. No kotirangi o ku tipuna e mihi ana ki ngā tohu o Pinehaven e noho nei au ko Hayley Aho. Kia ora everybody. My name is Hayley. I actually am a Hutt City staff member. I work in the urban design team. But I'm speaking to you as a commuter today. And what I have to say, I think, dovetails really nicely with the comments that have already been received. So I'm quite excited to speak. I live in Silverstream and I commute to Lower Hutt CBD. Getting off the Waterloo train station to the Lower Hutt CBD is 2.2 k's. That's not a walkable distance if you're measuring as an urban designer. I would really like to advocate for the removal of the bike ban on peak transit on the trains. I can see that in the past that policy had a reason, but at the moment I don't think that reason stands. Quite often I'm on a train carriage by myself, and in nearly 2 years of commuting into Lower Hutt, I've never been on a train where there wasn't room for more bikes on the carriage I was in. So as well as the fact that there is obviously capacity within the system and the environment that probably spawned that policy has changed, the policy is inconsistently enforced. Often I've scrutinized the train schedule that's actually on the train. Which trains can I take my bike on? And I've turned up and been told no. And so there's some inconsistent enforcement because some people say, oh, it starts from where the train left the station at Up Hutt, or it starts from when the train gets here. So if you turn up ready to go to work with your bike and you get turned away and you have to bike home and then figure out a plan that doesn't really work as a commuting option. So because of that inconsistency of enforcement, we're also losing people who might be commuting to work on the edges of those peak times. The reason I want to take my bike on the train is because I actually would like to bike all the time, but I have a young family. I've got a 7-month-old, and I need the flexibility of transit to work with my active mode. I think active mode transport and public transit are symbiotic, and they support each other to be more flexible and reliable. I can't always take an extra hour out of my day to commute by bike to work and back. But what I can do is take the train and commute back in the afternoon. I have a 7-month-old, so we're going to start having to trip change to daycare. So I can't take him and then walk 2 kilometres and then another kilometre to daycare and then back to work. That doesn't work. I don't have the hours in the day to take away from my young family to work without the support of being able to take the train. There's also not a bus connection, as someone was speaking before. So I can't take the train to Waterloo, get on a bus into the CBD. That bus isn't there. So I actually need something of an active mode in order to complete my journey to work. So a bike in this instance would be my best option. This is just my story, but I am sure there are many other experiences similar. But what all comes out of it is that flexibility is really important, especially at those peak times. At the moment, the way that peak travel for commuters is set up does privilege a certain type of commuter. It privileges someone who's got childcare sorted, who is fit and can walk 2 kilometres by themselves. And an interesting point, which maybe is not considered, is having a bike or a scooter for a woman commuting back home after dark is actually really important as a safety feature. If you can get off the train and leave the train station quickly, that's a much safer option than having to walk and maybe someone follows you. It's not very comfortable. You can only walk as fast as you can with your laptop bag. But I have found that having a bike or a scooter gives me the freedom as a woman to commute later at night and still feel safe in those spaces. I think the changing this policy of not allowing bikes on at peak times is a really low capital investment with high return on making it more welcoming and accessible to use the train to get where you need to go on your own terms. If I could bike every day along the Hutt River Trail, I would, rain or shine. It's beautiful, but that's not an option for me because of my family and for probably many other people like that. I would like to say also that the train replacement bus often misses Manor Park, just as a small note. And I have a small other piece of accessibility information that's been passed on to me that kind of ties in with that. That for many people with low vision, the paper bus timetables are too small to read. Also, the online app, and as in this case, it's not very easy to find which things you can take a bike on, but the online app is not accessible to a lot of people, especially if they maybe don't have a phone. So I was just asked to pass on that piece of information, that an accessibility overview of how the bus timetables look at bus stops would be really good. The feedback from the accessibility communities I've been working with is that they really value the real-time digital displays. Right, I think that's it.
I think your 5 minutes is up, but
Oh, sorry.
questions for you, Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Hayley, and thanks for bringing up the issue of bikes on trains. It's one that I also grapple with as well when I'm out in the hut. I guess a couple of things. What would you, as we're about to, this is more sort of philosophical and future focused, is we're about to, we're in the process of our new fleet of tūhono trains and the design of those. What would you think would be good design for that to ensure multimodal transport where you could use bus and rail? And my second question is around secure bike parking around the Hutt rail stations, and noting that as someone who works at Hutt City Council, your city is installing a lot of secure bike parking. What would you like to see at the Metlink stations that would perhaps integrate and be consistent with what Hutt City is doing, and how would you see us working together?
Having my bike at the train station does not feel like a safe option. If I'm there at 6 o'clock at night, unlocking my bike with my back towards what's happening and faffing around, I don't feel super secure that that's a really great option for me. That's personal. We do have a high theft issue with e-bikes and bikes in Lower Hutt. I actually know that many staff members at City Council would like to bike, but have had e-bikes stolen and can't because e-bikes are so much more expensive than a manual bike. Having them stolen is a real blow. I don't think I would ever leave my e-bike at a train station, especially if I had to get on it late at night. Sorry, that's not very helpful. As far as
what Hutt City's doing around secure bike parking, and how would you like to see consistency, or do you think there needs to be consistency?
I think I'm a real big advocate for seeing some perhaps more indoor spaces with eyes on. Having secure bike parking. Lucky docks are great if you're going out for an errand, but for kind of an everyday long-term park, I think there's a sense that it doesn't feel enough yet to leave your bike somewhere like a Lucky Dock in such a public area.
Do you think e-bike users would pay to have sort of long-term secure facilities like that? Is there a price point, or would people?
I think that there is a price point. I think the price point needs to be less than it costs to park a car. I've actually done some maths on it, looking at the riverbank car parking costs and average wages of Well, I'd have to look that up where I put that maths. But what I've done is I've taken the average wages of people who work in the CBD, the average cost per week of car parking, and then looked at where the value is. And I think there is a price point, especially if it was inside. There was a sense that you could get ready to go biking in a secure way. I think for a lot of women as well, this is it. One barrier to using a bike is the fact that corporate clothing for women is different, and their expectations of how they appear in the office limit their ability to make that transition from active wear into the office. And that's not an issue for everybody, but the women that I've spoken to feel like the facilities at the end of their bike trips limit their ability to turn up in a professional manner to their job. So something that was perhaps more full service, had a kind of safety feature, whether it's a key card entry or a staff member, whether it's connected to the libraries. I do think that there is an audience of people waiting for something like that to make their commuting possible. I've talked to many of them that they're sitting there, I like biking, I want to bike, I can't figure out how to make it work. So that this is the peak commuting with your bike on the train. I think that's one element of it. I think what you're talking about secure bike parking in a way that feels safe and manageable and actually meets the needs of those commuters, it's got legs. And I think we could be, Wellington region could be a real first in the country and really nail it, because it's not complicated. It's just an empty space with, lockers, changing rooms, simple stuff that is possible.
Thanks for that, Hayley. Are there any other questions from members? Councillor Ponta.
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm making a habit of this. Not so much a question to Hayley, but for our consideration, I think, is the whole issue of bikes on trains at a period when we have lower capacity following COVID. I suppose my view is that we should be rubbing out the limitations on bikes on trains altogether until we've actually reached a capacity point. I know that that'll be challenging for staff, but this idea that you have to pick your way through the timetable to identify which train you can and can't be on when we actually want to make it universal is damn well for everybody, and not least us as councillors who have to hear from Hayley's frustrations about dealing with that set of circumstances. I really do think that we have a situation at the moment, perhaps not in some peak services, but most services should now be able to take bikes on trains when we're at 75%.
Thank you for that question, Darren. I think if we could have another action item on bikes on trains on peak services. I'm particularly concerned about, I guess, the inconsistent compliance that you're talking about, and I think that's the kind of answer that I'll come back to you in a letter and just advise what the current practice is. But for a future discussion around this table, I think bikes on trains and whether we can loosen the requirements around some of our peak services, if not all our peak services. We can't dismantle the patriarchy for you, but hopefully make some mistakes. Sarah has a one final question, and then I'm going to wrap it up because we're running out of time.
I just wanted to know if we could have some information too about the connections from Waterloo back to the CBD, the Hutt CBD. And I presume there is something, but it'd be useful for me to know where the limitations are with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hayley, for talking to us. It was very interesting, and it's good to get your perspective this morning. And thank you for waiting for the other public participants as well. Ka kite. Okay, so we're now nearly at 11 o'clock, and I'm conscious that that's only the public participation on our agenda. If it's all right with you, I'm just seeking leave of the meeting to move our New Zealand Transport Agency briefing forward to now, given Emma Spate has been waiting for some time, and I don't want to make her wait for any longer than necessary. Is everyone happy with that? Aye, perfect. So Emma, if you'd like to come up and and get stuck into your presentation, that would be great. And also, if you could start with, I guess, an introduction, because we've got some new councillors around the table who won't know who you are.
Kia ora tātou. Plenty of familiar faces as well as a few new ones. I'm Emma Spate, the Director of Regional Relationships for the New Zealand Transport Agency Waka Kotahi, and I sit on the Regional Transport Committee as part of the statutory functions required under the Land Transport Management Act. So I have been working in this role for the last 8 years, so have been very familiar with the systems and processes across. Automatically muted. No, back in. What I've got here today is a presentation which you've been provided with, which I will go through at a relatively quick clip and highlight a few of the really important things and then leave some time for questions. I know for those of you who are new to this, there is quite a lot of information, but you do have a lot of very experienced members around the table as well, so that there's a lot of knowledge around how the system works. And where, oh, perhaps if I turned it on, might work. Oh, there we go. So just briefly around NZTA Waka Kotahi, our role is to plan, invest, develop, maintain and regulate the land transport system, and we do that through a range of functions. We obviously have around 11,000 kilometres of state highway that we manage. We co-invest with local government in around 85,800 kilometres of local roads. We co-invest in public transport networks. We manage people's access and use of the land transport system through driver and vehicle licensing, and we regulate the transport industry, including rail. So it's a huge span. In terms of how we work with local government, one of the most critical things is around the development of the Regional Land Transport Plan, which is every road controlling authority and public transport authority makes a submission to this process. And this process will run through this calendar year and into the first half of next year. And any activity that seeks funding from the National Land Transport Fund can only receive funding if it's already in a regional land transport plan. So it's critically important that if there are activities that your council wants to see included, that they are in a submission to the RTC from council, and then the Regional Transport Committee will consider and rank all of those submissions, including from NZTA Waka Kotahi, and will come up with a regional land transport plan. Now, the Regional Transport Committee, which is made up of members from each of the councils and NZTA Waka Kotahi, will recommend back to you as council the Regional Land Transport Plan, and you can either accept it or decline it and return it back to the RTC. Once that's been approved, it comes into us, and our investment team will then look across every regional land transport plan for the country and come up with what's called the National Land Transport Program, which is the set of activities that will be funded over the next 3 years. So that's really important. To put things into the RLTP, you must have your share available through your long-term planning and annual planning process. And your office is very familiar with how that works. I'll go into this in a bit more detail, but the government policy statement on land transport is a really critical guiding document, and I'll talk you through that in the next couple of slides. As a public transport authority, the government policy statement also sets out some requirements that you must meet as part of the receipt of funding, And so that includes increasing private share for public transport and adopting the national ticketing solution. And then we work with your officers to audit what's being done across the funding you get from us. Very briefly, we have a structure that includes our long-term planning and policy setting functions. We have an operational delivery as road controlling authority. We have our commercial and corporate, which manages the fund and any financing activities. And we also have our regulatory branch. I'm not going to go into that in any detail, but you can always ask me questions at any time on that. And we have a set of roles and associated activities that we focus on as part of that. In each region, we have regional teams that have specific knowledge about what's happening in a particular region. As I mentioned, I'm the Director of Regional Relationships for Wellington and Top of the South, and we have people from across all those different functions within our organisation who work together to make sure we understand and engage in what's happening in this region. So coming to the legislation, and this is really important because this is the foundation of us as an organisation. We're a Crown entity and we're required to give effect to government policy. Why this is important is that in the system we operate in, that is set out in the government's policy statement, which is a document that is developed every 3 years and tabled in Parliament. The other way that the Crown can give us direction is through an all-of-government direction, which is also tabled in Parliament. Once a policy direction has been given to our board, they're required by law to give effect to that policy. So why that's important is that there may from time to time be policies that you individually or as a council disagree with or would like to be different. And you can maintain that position, you can advocate to the Ministry and the Ministry of Transport that changes should happen. But we as an agency are required to give effect until any change to that policy. And when we talk about that regional land transport planning process, as a council, you could put proposals up that do not meet government policy, and that's perfectly within your rights to do so. Once it comes through the RTC process, the RTC starts to have to think about the government policy statement and is it putting up a regional plan that is likely to result in a successful outcome for the region. And then once it comes into NZTA, Waka Kotahi and our board's consideration, we must give effect to that government policy. So if an RLTP came in that was totally unaligned to government policy, we simply wouldn't fund the activities in that plan that didn't align, and so the region would miss out. So there's really important alignment that has to occur through the process. The challenging thing, and this happens every time round, is that we're developing our thinking right now. Your officers are working on it, our officers are working on it, and we're working through what should go in our next plan. The Minister is working on a draft GPS, which will be released sometime in the next few months. And that's really what we use to try and guide how we prepare for the RLTP. Then there'll be a national election. The government will change in some way. Might be a large change or a small change. And as a result of that, that GPS will likely change. So we need to, at this point in the process, be really clear about what the outcomes we want to achieve, what our long-term plans are, but not lock in every single activity that we want funded, because that GPS change might change what the best package of activities is that we should be putting forward. So that's just the key legislative frame there. We also have a governing Act, which is Land Transport Management Act, which sets out our core functions, and there are a range of other pieces of legislation that determine what else we can do. Again, we can go into those if there's particular interest. As I said, the GPS will guide investment, and also what the GPS does, which is really important, is it sets out how much revenue will be raised. So the setting of the revenue is done by the Ministry of Transport, and then we gather it, and it comes into the National Land Transport Fund for us to then invest and utilise. The current GPS has 11 activity classes, so these are the funding buckets. And what's really important here is the GPS sets the activity classes, it defines what can be funded within those activity classes, and it sets a 10-year forward forecast of the range of funding for those activity classes. And then the board has to set where within the funding ranges they will aim to spend that money, and also act in a way that will balance those books over the 10-year forecast period. So currently we have 3 state highway activity classes for improvements, pothole prevention and operations. We have 3 local road activity classes, so improvements, pothole prevention and operations. We have 2 public transport activity classes, the services and infrastructure. We have a safety activity class which includes 1.3 billion that goes to police for road policing. We have 1,070 dedicated road policing officers and the activities associated with that, as well as our own safety camera program. And around $1 billion goes to rail. Rail gets additional Crown funding as well, and 460 million to walking and cycling. So in terms of the revenue for the fund, it comes through fuel excise tax when you pay at the pump, road user charges for people using diesel or electric vehicles, and other fees. It's a hypothecated fund, so revenue from those sources comes directly into the National Land Transport Fund. It doesn't go through the Crown accounts and the Crown budget process. And then it's allocated under the delegations that sit with our board. So here we have that in a picture. So on the left here we have the revenue from the range of sources. That all goes into the fund. We have a Crown borrowing facility that we also can utilise, which is added to the fund. Once the program has been established, the fund is then used to support that. From time to time, the Crown will say they want particular activities funded in addition to what's in the fund, and they'll give us Crown appropriations through the normal budget process. We then match all of that against the activity classes to ensure we're operating within those constraints. Make sure we fund our road policing and rail, and co-invest with councils in all of the activities that have been included in the program. So the program itself aligns to the GPS. Currently, we're forecast to spend around 32.9 billion, most of which comes from the NLTF, alongside 5.8 billion from local government share and 2.5 billion from the Crown. When we set the program at the start of the 3-year period, it's accurate for about a day, and then it starts to change as activities move and things take longer or run slower or become less important. And so we have what's called committed funding. So that's activities we are fairly certain about or are already underway. We have probable funding, which are things that we are well advanced in their planning and development and we're fairly confident about. And then we have possible funding, which is for things that we don't expect to be funded, but we have them sitting there available to be funded if our funds are to come available. And we work through the 3-year period with all of our co-investing agencies to ensure that our expenditure is on track, or that if it's not going to be utilised, it's returned to the fund so that we can maximise the utilisation of that funding within the 3-year period. So 100% of state highways, an average of 53% of local programs and activities, including public transport, and that's set at what's called a funding assistance rate. Funding assistance rates are, there's lots of detail about that on our website about how it's calculated, And again, if there's particular interest in that, I can go into that in more detail. But we also have some nationally delivered programs such as national ticketing and the safety cameras that are funded through the program. As I mentioned, we have our FARs, and they're available on our website. Your one is 51%. I've mentioned the Regional Land Transport Plan and the importance of understanding the GPS and how it connects to that RLTP. And I think the other important thing is then we need to look at nationally, how do we balance across all of the bids for funding that we see through the RLTP. And if we look at the current process, we probably were overbid by around $5 billion. So there's this very intense competition for funding across every activity that is able to be funded. I've mentioned the slightly tricky process with our GPS and how we roll through a process where we get a draft GPS and then an election which may change some aspects of the GPS. And your officers and our team are all very familiar with this, and so we will all work and support. You'll get support through that process in terms of what needs to happen or change. Another really important technical step that happens once we get a final GPS is we are required to set out our investment prioritisation methodology, and that is the technical specification of how we will give effect to and assess against the GPS. And so that will again come out shortly after the GPS is finalised, and your officers will look at that in terms of understanding how best to position the activities that you want to see funded. As I mentioned, we develop our own proposal that submits through the same process as all other road controlling authorities and public transport authorities. I've mentioned that you have to be able to fund what you want to include in RLTP, to fund your share, which should be 49%. But if there's something that you want to do that doesn't meet the priority or doesn't get over that threshold for funding, you can always fund it yourself at 100%. So there's no barrier to you doing that, but our experience is that most organisations would rather have the co-funding through the FAR. And I've mentioned the reporting and procurement as being important aspects that we keep a close eye on. I know you've been very interested in the national ticketing solution and the rollout of Motu Move. So we have the initial rollout started in Christchurch in November, and now the process of rolling out concessions, which is the very technically complex step, is well underway. And the card rollout will start middle of this year. And then we're aiming to bring the same rollout to Wellington next year. And Auckland will follow, and then the smaller regions phase out along the way. And we're seeing quite a significant consolidation as we now have embedded that rollout in Christchurch, which is really positive to see. Just touching briefly on a few of the activities across Wellington. And this is more from the NZTA Waka Kotahi perspective. We have a set of roads of national significance and roads of regional significance that are in varying stages of design, consenting and construction. And so those are identified there. We have a whole range of safety activities which are more concentrated on State Highway 2 and other connecting state highways. and our active modes, which are the Petone to Malang cycling link, which is completed, and Te Ara Tupua, which is the connection between Petone and Nauranga, and that is scheduled to open later this year. Overall investment in this region for the 3 years around 3.3 billion. So a very substantial investment in the region and its transport system. And I won't go into all of the different activities that are underway, but there's plenty of information available on those. Just to touch on a couple of things. Obviously, we work with your officers on key activities in this program of work. So the Malang transport improvements, which I know you've had public participation on some of the impacts of that, has been something that we've been planning for and working with Greater Wellington and Hutt City and as well as Mana Whenua for many years now. And we have always been very clear that this would be disruptive, that there is unavoidable disruption. And obviously it's not just the roading infrastructure changes, there's electricity and water impacts as well. So we continue to work together very closely on how we can manage through that. For example, I've been up in our Wellington Transport Operations Centre watching how the team is managing traffic lights and the phasing. For something like the closure of Block Road, for example, that's 7,000 vehicles per day that have to find a different journey. So it takes about 2 months for that to settle. And so while our team is adjusting light phasing and working through that, they have to make some adjustments and then wait for people's choices to adjust and change. And what will happen is people will say, I'm going to try it this way, and then another day they'll try it that way, and then they'll talk to their neighbour and they'll say, well, you go this way and I'll go this way, and we'll work it out. And when you multiply that by 7,000 vehicles, that's a lot of trying different things before people work out either a preferred new route or alternatives. I'm going to take the train from a different station, or I'm going to do something different. So it does take some time for those things to settle down. So we are listening very carefully through the disruption group to the feedback and working through that, but it's not something that we can just immediately make a change and miraculously everything will settle down. It will take time and it will continue to be disruptive for the next 5 years. So I'm not going to dress that up. We also have the 2 RONS projects that have been announced that we have briefed you on as well. Both the State Highway 1 Wellington improvements and the Petone to Granada and Cross Valley Link projects. And so those 2 are ongoing through the different phases that they're in. And obviously I can answer any questions that you have about those as well. And that's the end of my presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for the whistle-stop tour of the New Zealand Transport Agency. So now's your chance to ask questions. I've got 3 down on my list: Councillor Duffy, Councillor James and Councillor Free, and then Councillor Saw and Staples. Okay, we'll kick it off with Councillor Duffy.
Kia ora. Thank you, Emma. My question's around road user charges. Interesting, perhaps surprisingly. 2 aspects. One is there's inconsistency with the mixed system of excise tax and road user charges currently across petrol, PHEV, electric, diesel and so on. What is the current proposal to align and remove some of the inequities there? I understand there's something in the wings, but could you update? And then secondly, how does it affect public transport in terms of the bus fleet? I presume we pay road user charges on diesels, but there has been an exemption for bus EVs, but maybe that's coming to an end. Can you update on that too, please?
So firstly, the settings for the revenue side are set by the Ministry of Transport. So we simply collect once they're set. So yes, the current policy from the government is that they intend to move to a fleet-wide RUC. So it's using that methodology to collect all road user charges, and that is looking at setting up a consistent system across all vehicles according to their weight and usage. So connecting it very closely to how they impact on the roads that they're using. And there's obviously huge interest in this from everyone from road controlling authorities in cities, which are seeing heavier electric buses, for example, rural roads with heavy vehicles that utilise them through quite peak agricultural cycles as well. So yes, the intention is to move to a fleet-wide RUC. There's a lot of work to be done to complete that and determine exactly how that will be implemented. But there'll be more information available as those policy settings are confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Ngā kia koe, Emma, nice to see you. I have three hopefully very quick questions. You mentioned the SHIP, the State Highway Investment Proposal, and how we'll be consulted on it. Are we also consulted on the State Highway Asset Management Proposal for the maintenance of the road, since our buses do use quite a lot of the State Highway network here? Secondly, would love if you could share any early noises that you've heard from MOT around GPS. Understand if you can't, but I got to ask. Very important, as you've outlined. And thirdly, as we are the PTA that delivers the second largest amount of passenger rail services, probably quite helpful for councillors to hear about NZTA's role as the rail regulator. If you could share some information on that. Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of SHIP and CHAMP, that's the State Highway Investment Plan and the State Highway Asset Management Plan, and they are they're not consulted on per se. They're simply our proposals about what we see as priorities for funding, and State Highway Asset Management Plan is our plan about how we will manage the asset and maintain it. And both of those things are shaped by the GPS. So we look at what are the most important things. So, for example, the current GPS is very clear that it has high expectation about how we manage our road surface. So proactive management and ensuring that we have really good road surface, that it's able to withstand the expected use and deliver a level of service that the public is satisfied with. So for that reason, we've done a lot of very proactive maintenance of our state highways over the last 2 summers and the next summer as well, to really look at both how we manage the surface but also how we rebuild the deep layers of the road. So those are things that are quite high priority in the current settings. In terms of what things will come through those plans, once we have the GPS, we make that information public. It comes through the Regional Transport Committee, and that's part of that discussion with all road controlling and public transport authorities.
Right, but our officials are connected in and developing it alongside you guys.
Yes, they'll see that as that process goes, yeah. On the GPS, the signals from the Minister is very much that it will be a 10-year GPS, so taking the strong signals from the Infrastructure Commission that we should be really taking a long-term view around our assets and how we think about them. I think that's probably the only strong signal I can give you. I think we should expect to see the fiscal constraints that we operate under remain a key factor for consideration, and that the government will be looking for us to manage carefully within the funding available. And finally, is rail regulator. So we work with all rail operators, of which there are a surprisingly large number. I can't remember the actual number, but there's a lot more than KiwiRail. But we work across all of them, and obviously with KiwiRail and with operators like Transdev and with Metlink as well. So we really do want to see a system that is safe for users, operators, and the people around the rail network. And so we work both in response to incidents, but also proactively with all of those people who are part of the rail system, and the interoperability arrangements between those different players is something we think is really important and valuable, and we really recognise just how important that is to the safe operation of the rail system.
Thank you. I'm sure you could go on for much longer talking about the regulatory space, but I'll move on to the next questions. So I've got Councillor Free, Saw and Staples, and keep your questions succinct because it will be your lunch break you'll be eating into.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Emma. I just wondered if there's any, and forgive me if I've missed it, any sort of developing summary of the feedback on the State Highway 1 proposals through Wellington.
Yes, so we had around 850 people who turned up to our drop-in sessions and over 2,400 submissions to the feedback survey that they were able to complete. We will be releasing a report of that later this month.
Okay, thank you.
And then we'll be able
far.
Yeah, well, we've got a very, we are submitting consents under the fast track approvals legislation in the middle of the year, so we do need to move quickly.
Sorry, Councillor Saw.
Cool, thank you. Thank you so much, Emma, for the overview and giving us your time today. My question's around the NLTP and with the NLTP's focus on economic growth and productivity. How does your agency measure that and quantify that to see that the investment is returning on those two measurables?
So as I mentioned, that's set by the GPS, and we then codify that through the investment prioritisation methodology, and that will look at things like volumes that are transported, whether it's freight, people or vehicles on the network, and it will look at reliability. So that's is the network available, and can people reasonably predict the time it would take to get between the locations they're travelling, so journey reliability. And those are all factors that we know contribute to economic growth and the value that the transport system plays. So all of those things are codified, and then we're able to actually look at particular corridors and see how they're performing. And we also look at that in terms of levels of service, and levels of service identify the factors in the road network and how they're actually performing. And that can range from how the road surface affects people's journeys through to how intersections perform efficiently and enabling vehicle movements through intersections, for example.
So does it look at other? So does it look at the different modes that use roads? Does it also make comparison to rail?
You're probably testing the limits of my technical knowledge on that. Obviously, rail is a significant part of the passenger and freight system, and that's obviously why we fund both of those activities. So there is performance information available for those modes as well, and we also do see information tracked on, for example, use of cycleways in particular locations. Sometimes that will be cities doing that rather than us, because of depends which network they're on.
Cool. And just one more question was the one about ensuring good procurement processes. Just wanted to understand how that's unfolded with the review from NTF as much as you can, in terms of how NZTA's procurement may go in the future when there's something as complex as that project that has multiple agencies involved, a whole lot of different technical aspects. Could you speak to your own good procurement processes after that experience?
I'm not sure what particularly I can say to that, and we have run a procurement process. We've worked with contractors in terms of the delivery of that. We've run a number of reviews of that process to ensure that we are going to get the outcome that was set for that project. So those are the normal processes that you would set for
Would
major
you run the
procurement.
same procurement process again at the outset of
I
that?
can't speak for that. It's not my role.
Excellent. Councillor Staples and then Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. Very quick question, and it's a great presentation. Are you giving this same presentation to all our TAs? And
Yes.
You are?
Yes.
And you're putting emphasis on how things get into the RLTP and the funding required
Yes.
from them?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's critically important to understand that, for all the players.
Councillor Rhodes?
Thanks, Emma. Claire and I get regular invites to the Parramatta Residents Association,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got a very strong interest in what happens in Martin Esplanade. So I just wonder whether you had give us an update on what your current view is about changes, if any, to Martin Esplanade in the future, recognising future development up the road.
So we're working with Parramatta City Council on what their the planning and the changes in terms of additional housing and how that will impact on the transport system, including both public transport and on the road network. Until we have absolute clarity about what's happening there, we'll not make any changes to the current management of State Highway 59. It remains a state highway, able to be utilised for all the purposes it currently is utilised for, and we're not changing any of the bylaws relating to the clearways at this time.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap the questions up at this point, but one last question from me. So in terms of the RLTP process, I think it's fair to say that Greater Wellington was disappointed by the process that we went through last time, in terms of the fact that we did follow the advice from NZTA in terms of having the funding available, putting things in the plan, and some of the things, as far as we were concerned, and indeed as far as the feedback from NZTA was concerned, was that they did meet the prioritisation framework really well, and that they scored very highly in terms of economic growth, productivity, and value for money. Business cases came back with extremely high cost-benefit ratios, that kind of thing, which other funded projects haven't necessarily rated as highly on those things. So, are you able to give us any, advice for going through the process again? As it does seem like, I feel like we did everything right. We followed the process. We sought advice from NZTA, and they, confirmed the fact that we had prioritised the right things, that our projects did score highly under those ranking criteria, and yet things still didn't get funded. Now, I appreciate you've got a lot of things to fund throughout the country, but how can we do this differently to save a lot of time that we're putting into projects that don't end up getting anywhere, and the signals that we're getting from NZTA don't, in fact, translate into funding through the National Land Transport Programme?
It is really challenging, I know, for you, for all participants in the system, and we've got 78 councils that we're working with, and the part of the context that is important to be conscious of is, if we look at the last time round, we were $5 billion over bid. Now, what's also really important to look at is how much funding is available in an activity class over the 10-year forecast period. And is that activity class growing or increasing or staying the same? Because that will shape, because our board has to balance across the 10-year period, if there are any constraints sitting in that longer term forecast, it will impact on how much they can fund. So every road controlling authority could put in excellent funding proposals for activities that rate, as you say, demonstrate their value against the GPS priorities, and there's still not enough funding available to fund all of them. And so prioritisation will take place, and there'll be some relativities that will essentially mean that some things will be funded and other things won't. That is the difficult situation we face in terms of the constraints on the system and the desire for activities to be funded. So your officers working as well as they do and getting the feedback they do is fantastic. It's a testament to the work that they're doing to position you as well as they possibly can, because things can change and things can come back into a fundable position at any time. But it is important to look at the GPS. It's important to submit to draft GPS positions and to identify where you see potential restrictions on the value that you could deliver because of those bigger settings. And you can look across the continuous programs that are funded across all of the parts of the system. That's all publicly available, and see, where there's large programs, and also factoring in the fact that costs don't appear to go down anywhere in the system anywhere, and so as costs go up, that the effective available dollar doesn't increase to the extent that people would like it to do. So it's really tough, and I appreciate that it can feel pretty disappointing when you do everything right and you still don't get the scale of return on that investment that you'd like to see.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming and presenting to us and answering the questions. I'm sure I and others around the table have a whole raft of questions that haven't been asked. I have a whole bunch in relation to Riverlink that I'm keen to delve into more deeply. So maybe we can arrange another time for you to come back and answer some more of our questions, and maybe have a bit of a Riverlink deep dive at some stage as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, it is 11:38, so we are drastically running out of time, and by my agenda we have 4 items left on the agenda to cover. So we've got the public transport performance report, and then immigration settings on for bus drivers, rail replacement services, and LINRIM, which is the worst acronym in the whole of Wellington. So we've got less than a quarter of an hour for each of those items. So I'm going to start with the public transport performance report. Now this report, they're all only for noting, and I guess I'm hoping we can quickly go through the performance report. You will have read it, and I'm going to ask Sam if she could... I'm going to ask the team if they really briefly could cover it off, because I would rather spend more time on those issue-specific papers that we have on the table this morning.
Would you, Chair, would you just prefer to go straight to questions?
Unless there's something urgent and busting that you really want to tell people.
No.
Okay, questions on the public transport performance paper. Okay, so I've got Councillor James, Councillor Saw, Councillor Duffy. Okay, let's kick off with Councillor James.
Thank you. Just want to highlight for other councillors and around the bus patronage and revenue numbers and how that has gone down. If you recall, back in November, December, we had a discussion around revenue that Metlink was getting in, and while rail revenue was down, bus revenue was up, so it's sort of balancing out. I just want to highlight to councillors that now, unfortunately, bus patronage is down 1.4%, and that is leaving a little bit of a hole, which Ros and I have discussed with officers, and this says they're going to go and dig into that a bit more. But is there anything else you guys would like to add?
Maybe it's one that Tim could pick up.
I can just say something quickly. I think, thanks Tom for raising that. So yes, we are seeing an ongoing decline in rail patronage, which is reflected in fare revenue. So yeah, the work we're doing at the moment is to quantify the impact of that for our likely end of year position, and then also for the opening for the annual plan. So both in terms of what that looks like if that continues, and also continue our work to look at what we can do in the short term to stimulate patronage, which takes a longer time. There's no immediate thing you can do to do that, but things like reliability and punctuality we continue to look at.
Excellent. Councillor Saw?
Thank you. Also, I want to note for our new councillors that there have been a lot of improvements to the report that's attached to this paper. So thank you to the staff for your continued improvement in providing us the information. My question is around, it's on page 10 of Diligent, and it's paragraph 24 around the rolling stock maintainer. I'm on the right page, yeah. And that one of our sort of parts providers has gone out of biz. Can you, are there any mitigations or assurance you can give us that further units won't be impacted by planned or unplanned maintenance and the lack of those parts? Like, have you looked into that?
So yes, we have. We've got a fairly extensive plan on units that are currently out. So we've currently got 7 units out because of the Trovon issue. There will be 11, but we have a plan of where a sliding scale to going from minimal impact to customer to heavier. We've been in operation for this over the 7 units for probably since the 12th of January, and we're not seeing any, we're definitely not seeing any issues to schedule timetables, and we're seeing minimal impact to customer experience.
Okay, I was just wondering about the unplanned maintenance. So, you know, if we had extra units that are coming off and not being able to get parts, I was just wondering if that's a possibility.
We are working with Transdev, and maybe I've got Nathan here with me, can talk more to that part of it. But
sorry, I'm going to take us further away from lunchtime.
Yep. Through you, Chair. Hello, Council. So the Trovon is specifically related to the incidents, or the lack of parts is specifically related to planned maintenance. Okay, so it's all the planned maintenance that we are now having to defer or stop until we get these components back in place. Any components that would be issued by Trovon or as was, if they fail, yes, we were in the same ballpark. It's unlikely to. Don't quote me on that, but it's unlikely.
Yeah.
Sorry, could I just butt in with a Trovon question? So you've now seen the recovery plan from Hyundai Rotem. When will we expect essentially it to be business as usual on the maintenance front?
August, effectively. All being well, August.
Continue.
Okay, cool. And then my next question that made me think about was, how do the conditions of the tracks impact our rolling stock, if at all?
Yes, is the answer to that. However, we do work with Kiwi Rail to identify areas of the track which are needing some attention, and Kiwi Rail are reasonably good at monitoring and controlling that through their inspection program and through putting in temporary speed restrictions.
Cool. Can I get onto all the other questions I've got? Is that okay on the attachment? I had a question around bus reliability and around the punctuality at destination. And my question was, are we able to flush out which routes in particular are affected by this reliability? Because I note, again, it's north-south Kandala, Brooklyn, which we've had for quite some time. And I guess the thing is that even though our numbers are high, if it's a particular service or a particular route, that's a community that's being impacted on routinely as opposed to other routes. So is there a way of us to be able to have that slightly more granular information? And that also goes for page 19 of Diligent, where we're talking about punctuality at destination, and it looks like, was it about nearly half of our trips are early, and there's an increase. Could we have a breakdown or a bit of a heat map so we know if it's particular routes or times of days of the week? Because there might be, parts of our community that are acutely affected by that, and there could be other people who never have that experience and have like a totally premium PT experience. So
I guess that feeds into a request I've already made of the Metlink team in regards to reliability. Our reliability stats are really, really good now, but I'm just concerned that there
Could be
are
pockets.
services that aren't meeting that high standard, and there are particular consumers that are being more affected than others. So I wonder if we could get that same stats across a couple of those different metrics.
and what the actions might be to improve that. And then finally, my last question was, so that question's answered. And then 23 on diligent was around the cancellation and the rail replacement services. And I just wanted to understand whether the staffing levels or the buffer of staffing levels is sufficient, that it's not impacting our ability to have those services, because a lot of them seem to be staff sickness. Are we able to drill into that a little bit more, please?
We asked Transnet the same question last for their December report. They believe that they are. Certainly said that they're actively recruiting. Training's going well to fill any gaps that they've got versus establishment.
Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Duthie, then Free, then Staples.
12 questions, but I'll just prioritise 3 of them, if I may. First one relates to page 18, page 4 of the attachment report, to do with early departure times from intermediate stops. So we've raised it before in the committee. There seems to be a persistent pattern of 9% of buses departing early from timed stops, which we often hear in public comment and constituent complaints about the frustration of that, especially if you're getting off a train to catch the connecting bus and the bus is already gone. And in the rolling average thing, it's actually picking up in the graph there. It's slowly increasing over time. So the first question is, how can we stomp on that? Because there's no reason a bus driver should be leaving early. Late to do congestion, all sorts of things, but early is a choice. Second question is, something went on in end of last year, November, December, that had a really positive effect on us using more diesel and less electric, more electric and less diesel over the fleet, and had a nice downtick in the emissions. So I'm interested in, what was going on specifically that resulted in that? And then third question, for bus and rail, we get a sort of a fare variance, so how fare revenue is tracking, varying from budget, but that information is not provided for ferry, which I understood when we had a gross contract, but now that we're on the same sort of contract for ferry, can we receive a variance to see how we're tracking against budget for ferry revenue? Thank you. 3 questions there.
Yes, we can do that for you. No problem. Going back to number 1, yes, there's no reason why a bus should be leaving early, and we've obviously got to put some work into identifying which ones are doing it, and get on to operators about that. Number 2, what was question 2 again? Sorry. About bus emissions.
Yes, so quite a marked increase in the proportion of bus services provided by electric buses in late last year. Interested if there is a reason for that.
I'm not too sure. I can't answer that question, but I actually think we've added a couple of extra electric buses. Yeah.
On the first 2 you responded to, can we have that in the action list for some follow-up? Because that early bus leaving we've raised before, and it keeps coming back, and I really want to see some action on that. And then the ferry revenue, I'll just leave you to.
I agree. We have raised the early departure times a number of times, and I also circled 9.1 being quite a chunk. So yeah, if we could have, I guess it doesn't possibly need to be an action item in terms of our minutes, but a bit of follow up just on what actions we're taking in response to that would be good. Okay, Councillor Free.
I've just got 3. The Trovon going out of business. Who bears the risk of that? Is it the regional council, or is it the Transdev, or what is it? Who actually, if things turn to custard, who bears the risk?
The contract is with Transdev, so it's not with Greater Wellington. But obviously the risk and the fallout of not being able to run trains will obviously sit with us.
Do we have any way of, like when a service isn't delivered with the buses, I understand there's kind of a penalty system. Do we have the same thing with trains if they don't deliver the service because for any reason?
They do. So you have to provide the right constant size. So to whatever the timetable is stated. So if you had an 8-car service and now suddenly it's a 6-car service, there is an abatement there, but we've had to provide Transdev relief over this period while we've worked through what we plan to do there.
Yeah. This is a very complicated area. Sarah, I've just been getting my head around how the Transdev contract works and how any abatements and penalties work. So possibly this is something that would be useful for staff to write a briefing or a memo to councillors, just covering off a little bit of how the contract works and what the mechanisms within it are, because there's a lot of detail.
I know, but to me it seems like we supposedly have the ability to kind of hold them to account, but actually we quite often are nice and let them off the hook, and I kind of wonder if we've got enough teeth. But anyway,
I think we've definitely identified that as something that we need to remedy moving forward. So in the next tranche of Transdev contract negotiations, that will be something that we'll put on the table. Unfortunately, we're bound by the current contractual conditions, and they are very complicated.
Okay.
Part of the choice we had to make too was coming out of the summer block of line. The choice was go to bus replacements straight after block of line or provide relief, and no one wanted to put more buses on.
What do you mean by provide relief?
Sorry, Sam just wants to make a comment.
Okay.
So if one of you could turn your mic off.
Okay, thank you.
I think just in general terms, the contract does have provides for appropriate yes, against the obligation of Transdev to run the services in the way we've specified them, which is straightforward from a contractual point of view, but the operational impact is often not straightforward. And so there are things, as Paul said, to balance in terms of what actually are the consequences of doing the thing that we can do under the contract from a customer point of view, which sometimes could be means buses or so there is it is the complication is in the way the ecosystem of how all those things fit together. So I think that for the purposes of this conversation, the important thing is that yes, we have a contract in place which does give us the ability to do things like abate, and then the next step is, in any given situation, what's the best course of action for the whole system and to ensure that we are holding people to account and also providing a service.
Yeah. Next question is just on the health and safety data, the physical assaults. This is on page 20 of 21. So we've got physical assaults and verbal aggression, but then we've got all aggressive behaviour, and the numbers of the first two categories don't add up to the all. So what is the difference made up of? You can see the green lines, which is all, is in many cases more than the sum of the two component parts that are outlined.
So we've tried to put in the all category anything that might be children being disruptive on a bus, drunken behaviour, those type of things we tried to put into the all. Aggressive behaviour or verbal aggression is obviously what it is, and assaults that someone's actually been physical with someone else. Okay. So those numbers have stayed relatively flat. Still too many. I think we're running at roughly three assaults a month. We've had a number of discussions with our operators that from all the data that we see that comes through Resolve, a lot of that is the driver stepping or our staff stepping into the situation rather than necessarily using their training to resolve the situation.
And the third thing, thank you, and the third thing I just wanted to note, the use of off-peak bus fares and buses seems to have increased the patronage by 100,000 trips in the off-peak, according to some of the data, and there was only a loss of 18,000 off the peak. So it wasn't just people transferring, it was actual increase in patronage. So would you say the off-peak fares have been quite effective then in getting new customers to the buses?
Well, I think from what we know that 50% of our customer base travels on peak services and 50% are travelling on off-peak, and part of it will certainly be around those cheaper off-peak fares.
Yeah, it did seem like a compelling case for them, but anyway.
Excellent. We'll move on. I've got questions from Staples and Rhodes. Could you keep them succinct, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Mine is a very short question. On page 11, item number 29, it says in December 2025, 21% or 1,942 of our rail services were replaced by buses. Everything in the report is in percentages, and I just wondered offline if somebody could actually tell me how many rail services we actually run in a month, because nearly 2,000 is quite a big number, but I wouldn't have a clue in real numbers how many rail services we run a month. So offline would be fine, Paul, at some stage, if you wouldn't mind. Thanks.
Well, just a quick one. On the last page of the report, it talks about the difference between fare revenues and budgets. Looks like quite a lot of money, like in a loss situation. So how do you account for that? Is that sort of like budgets being too optimistic, or sudden changes in the marketplace usage and things? Or
I might just get Tim to answer that one. Sorry.
Kia ora koutou. Through you, the Chair. Thank you, good question. As Sam alluded to, we will come back to Council with a deeper dive into why our patronage has declined. I think it has been noted that rail patronage is down 6% year on year, and it's also been noted that rail patronage tends to make quite a lot of money per journey because the journeys are typically much longer than a bus journey. So while the patronage may not look like it's down particularly far, it's the rail journeys that tend to make us the money, and they're certainly being impacted. Our forecasting had actually a mild decline in rail patronage this year. We thought originally it was quite pessimistic. Clearly it wasn't pessimistic enough. And we also have seen growth year on year on bus for the last 4 years, and that trend has now reversed. So there is clearly some socio-economic effects coming into play. But once again, we had a very flat growth profile for bus, which at the time seemed quite pessimistic given the growth we'd seen in the past. But those things added together is giving us the shortfall that we're currently seeing, which we expect to be around $3 billion for the year.
This is definitely, obviously, a priority for me, and I know for this whole committee. So we will keep providing updates and any strategies we can think of. So that's all the questions, unless anyone has any burning further questions for the team on the performance report. Councillor Ponta.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So at the Regional Transport Committee meeting earlier this week, there were questions from a number of the attendees in relation to this type of information, which is really rich and generally quite positive if you look over the year, about that information being presented to them at a more district level, if you like. So Kapiti getting information about how this all relates to the Kapiti district and Wairarapa to them. And so I wonder whether there seem to be two courses of action there. We could either present that information, repackage it and present it into the RTC on that basis, but in the interim it might be worth a letter from yourself giving all mayors an update. The reason for saying that, in addition, is that there are a number of mayors seem to come to the meeting with almost a legacy understanding of the performance of their network in their area. So, when we don't have a crash hot set of months and what have you, that sort of gets lodged into their brain, and then we're totally useless from then on forward. And actually, we just need to correct that, particularly in the Wairarapa, where we did have a terrible time. But these statistics seem to be showing that we've actually corrected a lot of that.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. So I will endeavour to write to all mayors in our Rohi, providing them with the performance report and also a bit of narrative specifically relating to the services in their area. If everyone's happy for that.
Could I just ask, please, following on from that, with regards to Wairarapa, because last year was a horror year, and we have done several presentations. It used to be through the Wairarapa Committee, but if we could have a presentation to the Combined Forum about our performance, I think that would be a good way of getting further afield than just the mayors.
I fully agree, and similarly, we're establishing a hut, a similar forum, so I think that's a good opportunity to raise it. But I will still write the letter to the mayors in all those cases. Excellent. Okay, that ends the performance report. Very conscious of time now, so as an admin solution, item 8, which is the Lower North Island Integrated Mobility Programme, you've got all the information. You've got extensive information in your diligent. Would you be happy if we either removed that from the agenda altogether, or would you like us to push it to a future meeting so that you can ask questions? What's the vibe?
Just treat it as it's.
Okay, we're just going to treat it as an information item, and obviously you can follow up with staff if you have any questions coming from that. Okay, so we will move on to item 6, which is the recent changes to the immigration settings and the impact on bus drivers. Are you going to talk to that, Paul? Okay, kick us off with a brief introduction, but again, we will take the paper mostly as read and head to questions.
Okay, well, I'll just go to maybe updating you on the numbers that were in the original table that's in the paper. So we had resident visas approved 10 and the accredited employee work visa extension approved 65. The resident visa approved has now gone to 11 and the accredited employee work visa extension approval has now gone to 81. So I think there's 16, 17 drivers who have now been approved since we published the paper. We're monitoring this weekly and getting weekly updates from operators as their numbers are changing. They're extremely confident that they'll have that there will be no risk to service. They've got good domestic recruitment plans happening at the moment. They're training people through the system well, and especially for April and March and April, they're going to reduce leave requests over that time as well.
So I've spent quite a lot of time trying to delve into this issue because I didn't understand it properly, and I now believe that I do understand it. And essentially, the thing that I hadn't grasped was that when the transport special pathway was introduced, there was always a 6.5 IELTS requirement in that. But so it hasn't changed, and the ministers are correct. There has been no change that has been implemented. But I guess that the story I'm hearing now is that both the applicants themselves and the industry really had no idea what a 6.5 IELTS requirement meant. And so, there was a feeling that that it would be okay. And we're hearing now, for example, that even native English speakers can't necessarily get 6.5 on the IELTS. So you all might not get 6.5 on IELTS if you sat the test today. So it's an extremely high level that involves not only English language understanding, but also comprehension of quite difficult concepts. So this is the problem that we're in. It was misjudged how difficult it would be to get drivers across that threshold. And now we're finding that if they don't pass that, the initial pathway was one for residency, and that required them to sit this test at this point, or 2 years down the track. They're at the point of sitting the test. If they can't achieve the 6.5 IELTS, which there are a large proportion not achieving that, they don't have to leave. They are given an extension of 2 years. And so now we're hearing from the operators that they believe there's no imminent catastrophe in terms of drivers because they are achieving a 2-year visa extension. But I guess I have ongoing concerns that they're just kicking the can down the road for another 2 years, and that at the end of that period, they won't be able to stay in New Zealand, and we'll be back to the situation we were. So I don't know that there's any answers out of that, just the fact that we really need to keep an eye on it and how their domestic recruitment is going, to make sure we've got some mitigations should this be a problem in 2 years' time. Councillor Staples has a question first.
Yes, thank you. Just following on from that, Madam Chair, I couldn't quite get my head around when I looked at the table of how many drivers we needed, which was somewhere around 737, and it's looking probably worst case scenario that we might lose about 20, worst case scenario. So that what the operators must be saying is that they've got recruitment ongoing at the moment that will mean that those people will be replaced if they lose these. But it all just seems a wee bit nebulous to me, that they've got people there if they might need them. If these 20 people don't get the bums rush, I just don't feel quite 100% comfortable that we could not end up with a shortfall, because if they've got these people being recruited, then that's going to give them more staff than they need. If the ones with pending visas get to stay, it just seems a little bit icky, and I don't know whether there's an answer to that or whether we just have to sit tight and see what happens.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you that no one's in control. We're not certainly in control of that visa process. So visas are taking between 4 and 7 weeks to get approval. So yeah, we're heading very quickly towards March, and we've got a number of drivers who won't end up with a visa, or who may not end up with a visa in that same time frame. And yeah, that's where the challenge is. But what the performance report, and especially around the driver numbers, doesn't show is the casual labour pool. So it's only talking about the permanent labour pool. So there is casual contingency there as well.
If I could just add, through Chair, I think from my interaction with our bus operators at the time of the bus driver shortage, the whole piece around staff management and staffing levels is a very it's a constant matter of making sure that there are enough people to cover. And yes, it's not only the permanent workforce; it's the casuals as well that form the whole workforce that are available. So they're looking at it all the time. It changes all the time, and I mean that's their job to do that. So I think it's never going to be set in stone. We're never going to be in a position where we can say exactly, but they're doing it, looking at it every day on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
I guess the trick for us, though, is to stay ahead of how those developments are going. And so we need to develop some lead indicators that are showing us ahead of time that there is an emerging problem or that there is no emerging problem. And I'm not entirely convinced that we have those bottomed out yet. So I think we do need to do some work with things that are going to give us an indication of the fact that we're heading in the right direction with driver numbers, or we could be walking into a problem again. So that's a challenge for the team, I guess. Any further questions on this paper? Yes, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I just want to make the comment on IELTS. That standard is the standard that you use to get into a polytechnic system if it's English as a second language, which is about level 3. It is true that some New Zealanders won't get through it, but that's actually preschool certificate level for the old days as to what. But what I did wonder about, because we're seeing it in different places too with applicants, is how much effort is being made to help get the English language up to standard, because in my past experience it takes 6 months to a year to get them to IELTS if it's English as a second language from some cultures. But also the cultural differences, because I am hearing from ratepayers just a lack of empathy and communication with some of our drivers as well, which can also be a cultural issue.
I would agree with you that some of that stuff has probably been started probably a little late, but we've got operators who have put people, have asked other drivers who are more competent, they'll wear an armband, and you can speak only English to those drivers. They've set up schools as well within the bus depots to help teach English, and they're also utilising Kiwi drivers who might be on long-term sick leave to assist drivers with their competency in English.
Any further questions? There being none, we will now head to my favourite topic of the day, which is rail replacement services. Just before, I'll invite the team to give us an introduction to this paper and maybe reflect on what we've heard this morning. I wondered if, as part of that introduction, you could also give us an update on what KiwiRail did over summer in terms of, there is a table at para 23 that has some small details of what was achieved, but I think we need to remember that that the planned bus replacements are mainly as a result of blocks of line being closed due to KiwiRail maintenance and renewals, and it's good to reflect on what KiwiRail is actually achieving whilst we've got the trains offline and are providing buses.
Right, so this report provides an overview of buses replacing trains. The report aims to give you an understanding of the contractual agreements with Transdev who operate the BRT services for both planned and unplanned disruptions. It also gives you background around our current operating environment with the rail network not being at a fit state due to years of underinvestment from consecutive governments. The level of BRT has increased over recent years due to increased government funding, with some months seeing over 30% of rail services being bus replaced. KiwiRail has still got a large volume of infrastructure maintenance and renewals to deliver, and that may take another 10 years to complete. Because of that, Metlink have developed the BRT action plan to help improve the experience for customers travelling on BRT. The action plan focuses on Platform 10, improvements at Wellington Station, improved online timetables, real-time tracking through the Metlink app, bus signage consistency, displaying BRT services on RTI screens, customer-centred block of line planning and bus route optimisation. Now, during this year's summer block of line, we had some measure of success and then some delays to the action plan. This year we proved the concept of tracking in real time of BRT buses. We had 5,900 users visit the tracking app over that period. BRT buses are showing up on real-time information screens, but we still have a lot of work to do in that space for it to be more legible than it is. Bus signage consistency was introduced with Transurban and Mana and NCS to ensure that customers knew their type of service, so express or all stops, and the direction in which the bus was travelling. The summer block of line went from the 26th of December to the 11th of Jan, and I'll note that in the paper on page 74, it does state that the Hutt Valley line came back on the 5th of January. It was actually the 12th, so there's a correction there. The first day back at work was the 6th of Jan. Not a great start to the BRT services on that morning due to capacity issues on the Hutt Valley line, which was for approximately 90 minutes during the AM peak. And then Transdev and Metlink had to implement a number of changes for the PM peak and the remainder of the week. Standby buses were utilised to alleviate passenger demand. We started the loop buses earlier in the morning, working between Petone and Waterloo and Wellington stations to add additional capacity. We also used the Wairarapa buses that were underutilised to come into Waterloo and Petone on the way through to pick up additional customers, and we also helped assist customers over to the 83 at Petone Station to better utilise that service as well. David's team interviewed 221 passengers following the summer block of line. Customer satisfaction scores for the period remained at the same levels as last year. So this year was 60% versus 59% from last year. Interviews also showed that 37% of interviewees avoided BRT by extending holidays, working from home or driving into work. David and I are here to answer any questions. David looks after our customer experience team and also has the technical information around the tracking app and the app and website, and also ran the customer engagement survey.
Kicking off the questions, we've got Councillor Saw and then I've got Councillor Free.
Cool, thank you. Thank you for the update and to see that those steps for the action plan are happening. What will we see as our next steps? I guess the next step I'm focusing on is paragraph 53, page 78 of Diligent, which is continue aligning systems and processes. Are we doing anything beyond enabling tracking? For example, are we investigating BRT being a specific route or unit that we would tender for? Because let's be honest, the rail work is going to continue for years and years and years. And I think this was something we raised last term as well. So are we seeing something that's a little more permanent for this thing that isn't going to go away? And given that we've got network optimization happening and Tamsin's team doing that work, is our bus replacement train routes and journeys going to integrate with that work? So we're looking at duplication with the rail replacements as well as the rail. That's my first question. And then will BRT be reflected in our future rail operator contracts? Yeah. Those are my first two questions.
First question. No, we're not currently looking at it as a unit. I think there would be a significant cost to that. You're not rolling buses 24/7, so utilisation would be poor on those units, and I think it would be very, very costly. With the optimisation program, we are also looking at how we better optimise our current fleet of buses to assist in BRT. So, and that's through providing alternative transport. So, whether you take the 110, for example, from Upper Hartigues down to Petone, do we provide BRT services from Petone, or additional services from Waterloo, but use the 110 and the capacity on that to? So, I mean, that's a big piece of work, and we're only just starting to get into that.
We have a sort of timeline of that kind of work, because then that means when we do get complaints from the community around BRT, we can say we're starting to look at things like that, and this is a timeline, because, like I said, this is not going to go away. Thank you for that. Yeah. And the next question, and the rail contract one.
Through you, Chair, just also wanted to say about that duplication of services. I think increasingly we are giving customers more information about what they can do instead, in terms of use this bus service rather than take the rail replacement. So that's an ongoing program in terms of our customer information. In relation to, sorry, Paul, I'll just pick this up. That what the shape of the future rail contract is when we go to market for that, we'll work that through. And I suppose the work that we're doing at the moment around this piece will really help us in terms of how we work out shape that for that tender. Yep.
Thank you. And my last question was, I know previously we had some issues around Kiwi Rail's block of line work coinciding with major events, and I know that we've done some work around that. I guess the new one now is NZTA's maintenance schedule, particularly the transmission gully closure. Is there a bit of coordination or communication there, so we're not having state highways close and BRT at the same time? And I guess how much skin in the game do we have there? Probably none.
You're right, it is a challenge, and we raised it at the Hut Disruption Governance Group a a few days ago with Hutt City Council as well, was that there is a lot of work happening all over Wellington at the moment, and everyone sees a public holiday or, Christmas has been the time to do that. So we've just got to be way more joined up in those conversations about what we're all planning on doing, and because you could end up with, half of Wellington at an absolute standstill. So it's certainly on the radar of what we've been talking about.
Thank you. Councillor Free?
Mine's really simple. It was just the first submitter we had this morning talked about the difficulties on the return trip, getting consistent information from the Wellington, I presume Wellington Station staff. And I just wondered if that's a point we can pick up and maybe try to ask for something.
I think there's a lot that we've taken from customer feedback over this summer block of line to help maybe inform and improve the current action plan. Communication is certainly one of those things. I think one of the things that we found that went really well this year was actually having staff and Metlink staff on key stations. Not only did it give us real-time information of what was going on the stations, how many passengers were waiting, but it also meant that our staff were helping to guide passengers. So I thought that piece was a real success this year. But we've spoken with Councillor Connolly about this as well. People do arrive at Wellington Station and have no idea of what they are doing. So that's certainly a part of the improved or the new improved action plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Elder?
As a continuation of Councillor Free's question, and speaking from personal experience, the customer experience of Platform 10 is challenging at times. Is there any update on timing and improvements around that experience for customers?
I guess that was going to be one of my questions as well. When you look at the action plan that you've provided and we've talked about before, that's kind of at its end. And I have to say, in terms of the infrastructure, I haven't noticed a whole lot of improvements. This issue of not knowing where to tag on has been an issue that has been raised for years and it still remains unaddressed. So I think we need the infrastructure at Platform 10 is poor. It's very confusing, and I'm concerned to see basically that timeline has almost finished and we should have completed all the things on the timeline. What is next? What are we getting in terms of timeline V2 and a new set of actions to improve BRT?
Well, Platform 10 has been a challenge. There's been lots of negotiations with KiwiRail over the lease of that. Now we do have some money set aside through for actual infrastructure improvements on Platform 10, but there is no budget for the ongoing lease costs.
That didn't answer the question, which was, are we going to get a revised timeframe for BRT action that involves infrastructure? If the answer is no, that we don't have any money to pay for that, we need to know that, because I think that would need to be a LTP or at least annual plan discussion, so that we can have a conversation about whether that is necessary.
But BRT needs a budget. If if we want to do a lot more improvements, if we're talking about buses, snapper equipment, there's improvements on Platform 10, improvements on other stations, it needs a budget.
Sorry, Sarah?
Can I just say that my previous question was about penalties, and you're telling, and we are using BRT because the trains are not running, and then you're telling me that they won't actually come to the party and try and make it easier. I don't think there's something doesn't actually seem right with it's not sitting with me. I have to be really honest, and we're losing money because people are choosing not to travel on public transport, so we're paying that way and then waiving penalties, and then it's been made difficult to actually try and direct people to use the alternative. I just have to say it doesn't smell right to me as a councillor sitting here.
I think it's fair to say that there is an immense amount of frustration around this table about the ongoing issues of BRT. And I was particularly disappointed with the first day back because a number of councillors had sought assurances around the smooth running of BRT on that first day back. We had some very challenging but informative lessons learnt the year before, and we should have been across it better. And I appreciate the work that the team did to mitigate, the performance of BRT, but it was too late. We should have been across it on day one, and we weren't. And it seems like there's a necessary set of infrastructure and supporting actions that we need to take. And I'm concerned that we haven't really had advice on what that's going to cost, and how long it's going to take, and what we can expect in terms of improvement from that. Councillor Ponta?
Yeah, I think the issue that we're sort of uncovering here or discussing is the fact that BRT's become a permanent feature of our landscape rather than a temporary one, and it was never designed for sort of permanent, ongoing set of circumstances. So I would think one of the questions that you did raise with us last month, I think, Paul, was the issue of whether we saw BRT being a unit. Can you, sort of reflecting on that, can you unpick what you think that might look like and how that might change, how that might either improve things or change things in relation to the way in which we provide BRT?
Well, I think if it was a unit, you have accountability of one operator to manage that service. You've got all Metlink buses in that piece of work. So, in terms of being able to have tracking on every bus, the RTI screens work, OBA works. I think you'd have it would look like a proper Metlink service, but I think it would be extremely cost prohibitive.
Right.
To do that.
Does that presume that if you had it as a unit, you would actually have to then buy more Metlink buses to actually sit in the background waiting for a BRT event?
Well, I think our buses go on.
Through you, Chair, I think this whole piece about what is a better operating model for BRT is something that we we'll all have ideas about, but we need to actually work it through in terms of what we're experiencing and what we expect to happen over the next period of time. And I think that there are, what this work that we've been doing on the BRT action plan has shown us is that there are so many different aspects to it. We've been really trying to focus on the things that make the most difference for customers, which I think we have, but clearly it isn't the perfect thing that we would like as yet. But that will come with a price tag, so we will be doing the work on that for the next, certainly for the LTP. But I think the if it's its own unit, there's a whole lot of things we need to work through about whether that will be the best way to go or not. I don't think probably now might not be the best time to talk about that.
I guess though I'm looking for a pathway to have that advice provided. So we've done work around a BRT action plan. That action plan has been completed now. What are the next steps? When can we expect this conversation? So I have a recommendation, and I don't know whether you want a formal motion, but essentially it's to develop a set of customer-focused metrics to allow assessment of BRT performance over time, and that will also allow us to assess interventions and to determine whether they're actually being effective. That could be part of the future kind of planning that you intend to bring to us. So I'm happy to not formally move that if you can kind of agree to bring us a paper at the next meeting that plots the way forward for BRT and includes some measurement of customer metrics.
So thank you, through you, Chair. I think we do need to do the next version of the BRT action plan. Obviously the one you've got on the pack finishes in December, so we need to provide the next iteration of that, if you like, in terms of the future planning for BRT, and bearing in mind that there are financial implications of doing anything. I think and bearing in mind that we are in the process of finalising, working towards finalising the annual plan, we can gather up what we have in relation to BRT and specifically communicate that at probably not the next meeting, but maybe the meeting after that. And then the next question will probably be a long-term plan conversation around actually, when we're resetting the budget altogether, how do we want this to appear in that budget?
So, Councillor Palmer.
So the flip side to BRT, of course, would be KiwiRail not blocking the line. And so in which case we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I wonder, Sam, whether when we are considering where we go on BRT, we are also pushing all the buttons that we can with KiwiRail in relation to their efficient management of their maintenance operations. Because I get the sense that they take their sweet time to do the works that they need to do on the lines. Now, they do a good job, but do they do the most efficient and effective job? Because each day that they take that they don't need to take is a day when we have to put BRT on.
Yes, and that is definitely part of the picture.
Okay, good.
So the action that we're recording in the minutes is that we are going to bring back a paper, not potentially to the next meeting, but the one after, outlining the next stages of the BRT action plan, and particularly with reference to my request around customer-focused metrics. And then we can go from there and know what conversations we need to have ahead of the LTP that is coming up. But this definitely is a priority action as far as I'm concerned, and we haven't covered ourselves in glory in relation to BRT services to date. So I'm getting the word from Francis that we need to wrap this up. Are there any other urgent burning questions before we close? Just by way of information, you will have got an email letting you know that applications or nominations for the Public Transport Advisory Committee are open. So encourage your friends, family, acquaintances, contacts, anyone that has a real interest in the public transport space to put their names forward, and we'll go through the process. Anything else for anything else? Otherwise, I will close us off with... No, we've agreed that that would just be received, and if you have any questions, follow up with the team. Okay, I will close us off with the closing karakia. Kia tau te rangi Māori e, kia runga, kia raro, kia roto, kia waho, eau ki te aorangi, ka whakamaua kia tina. Hui e, tae ki e. Thank you very much. Go enjoy some lunch.